This video is going to show you version number 2 of how to make a copper wire sphere. You can see here that I have my giant roll of 20 gauge solid copper wire. And then I have a thinner gauge, so 28 gauge of, just so happens to be, copper wire as well. I'm going to be using my regular larger needle nose pliers. And then for the first time, I'm going to introduce to you the jewelry needle nose pliers, just so you can see how those are very useful to use. So first things first, I'm going to take off some length of the copper wire. This bit was wrapped around and it's a little kinked up, so I might make my life a little bit easier rather than trying to work all those kinks out. Just cut that first bit away and not bother with it. So I'm going to, again, just pull off, I don't know, about 2 feet of wire. And when you cut the wire, especially on a spool like this that's not encased in plastic, you don't want it to unravel. So what you're going to do is cut, and while you're hanging on to it with your other 2 fingers, and then sometimes the spool might have a little slit in it, like a spool of thread might, but here I'm just going to take it and poke it through the paper label, and that's going to prevent it from unraveling. In this one, I'm going to show you how you might use a jig. So a jig is kind of any implement that helps you hold things. So I'm going to use my water bottle from the Oakland Museum of California. Bright orange, so I never lose it. It's a circular bottle, right? And I'm going to take my copper wire and wrap it around. And what I'm going to do is just make the beginning of like a little twisty tie, okay? And then I'm going to slide it off. And then I'm going to cut that. And don't be mad at me for not putting this in the first video, because you could initiate your other sphere in this same way. And now I'm going to close these up. So you might even find that you start to get pretty dexterous with the pliers. You could clamp the wire with pliers in one hand and then use your other pliers to do the wrapping. I'm going to trim that excess. Sorry if I move out of the frame. I'm still getting used to working with the camera. So again, holding it with my left hand in the pliers. Okay, first circle done. Now, it might seem like, oh, this is the easiest way to do it. I'll just wrap a bunch more wires around the water bottle and voila, I can fit together a sphere. That is more or less true, although one thing that you do need to consider is that as skinny as this is, it still has dimension, so that when you wrap the next bit of wire around the bottle, it's not going to fit perfectly within this one if it's exactly the same diameter. So you'll actually want to size it down just a tiny, tiny bit. And that will allow the wire circles to nest together. So what I might do for this second one is twist the wire a little bit, just maybe one side, okay, and just sort of mark my spot by wrapping both ends. But then before I commit to making a join, I will seat this inside of the first hoop that I made. And that way, when I start to assemble my sphere, they won't bulge out in funny ways, and they will actually nest together. So you can see that that's quite a bit different than the join I would have made. So here compared to here. So it's worth doing that extra step of measuring. And I'm just going to squeeze these together so I don't lose my place. Think of them as like little bookmarks. Okay, so once again, I'm going to use both pliers. I'm going to clip the excess, hold these in my left hand, and join with my right. Clip the excess. Number 2. I'm going to make one more. Barely have enough. And then this one, I want to nest even inside of the third one. So let's see how much of a difference this is. Quite a bit. Who would have thought? So that's the discrepancy between my thumbnails. Okay. And it's not an exact science, but from practice, I will tell you that it helps to nest them before assembling. Okay. All right, got my 3 circles. So remember, we're distinguishing between flat shapes and 3-dimensional forms. So circles are flat, spheres are 3D. Before I start to assemble those, I'm going to unspool some of my fine wire, my 28 gauge. If I can get it out. Wow, okay, that was really stuck. But that is the little slit I was talking about where, kind of like a spool of thread, you can tuck things back in so that they don't unravel. And with wire this thin, you can even use scissors to cut them, although if they're really precious scissors, don't do that. And then I might even cut this into smaller bits. It's hard with the pliers even. So rather than trying to hold all of these rings together, I would start with just 2. And these messy bits where the joins are, those don't have to all clump in one area. You can disperse them. And in fact, to make this process even easier, I would drop that second hoop and just get the thready wire, the thin wire, just get it started by winding it onto the first hoop. And because the wire is so fine, you can do most of it just with your hands, but the pliers are handy for cinching down the last little sharp bits, things like that. Okay, so now you're going to take your second hoop, and don't worry about aligning it perfectly just yet, because it's the first one, so it doesn't really matter. Sorry, I made that move and I didn't explain what I did. I took the thready wire and I just wrapped it around the first side of my second hoop. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the original hoop and then loop it around. It doesn't matter if you go over or under. And then I'll come around to the fourth arm, so to speak, and loop that around again, and then back to home base. Okay, so you can see it's very, very fine, but I've just gone around and looped it around each of the 4 lengths of my intersection. And you can cut that. I'm going to wait to do that. And I just want to do my second join. So again, that trick of aligning things, close one eye and make sure that these are even. You're not going to join it over here. Not that you could anyway, there's too much of a gap. But it just helps to shut one eye and assess what you're doing. And then you're going to take your next length of thready wire, and here I'm just going to cross the wire over, wrap it around, go to the next arm, wrap it around, and just make my way around that intersection. And before I go all the way, I'm just gonna, make sure that everything's lined up as I want it to be. And you can keep going with this. It's kind of becomes a fun pattern. If you ever went to a summer camp and made what they called God's eyes with popsicle sticks and yarn, it is exactly that pattern. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so 2 of them intersected. Now I'm going to take my last hoop. Maybe I will initiate tying the wire on. And then I'm going to slide it in. And maybe this one will go perpendicular to the other circles of wire, or maybe at a funky angle. So be creative if you want with how they're going to create a sphere. So I've kind of got, pretty much looks like an equator, and that's fine. That'll give me a good solid sphere. Not a solid sphere, a sphere that has volume. Haha, sorry. Geometry joke. right, last one. I'm discovering there's a little gap. So my nesting wasn't exactly spot on, but perhaps you can figure out the perfect formula for decreasing your circle sizes. All right, there you have it. Sphere number 2.